First of all, I would like to welcome all of you to OLO School of Business and Leadership First On Conference, which is our word now. This conference, it's mainly addresses COVID issues in business, computer information system, and security and leadership. Our session today is about Computer Information System and Security Department. I am the moderator, Dr. Alomari. I have a PhD in cybersecurity from Dakota State University. Currently, I'm assistant professor in Computer Information System at ULO. And as well, we would like to welcome our panelists here today. And I will give you a background about our panelists. We have Mr. Clark, Michael Clark. He has a BBA in 2016. He has a master in information system and security. He's a senior security analyst. He began his career in cybersecurity as an intern of security and compliance operations and managed security operations. He then began his full time tenure as a security specialist and is currently a senior security analyst. His cybersecurity experience includes performing internal, external, and web application penetration tests, physical site reviews, and remote and on-site social engineering engagement. He graduated summa cum laude with a Bachelor of Business Administration degree in Computer Information System and Security, as I said, in 2016, and he has a Master of Science in Information System and Security in 2019 from Our Lady of the Lake University. Mr. Clark holds the Security Plus Certified Ethical Hacker, Offensive Security Wireless Professional, and GIAC Web Application Penetration Tester Certification. Mr. Zachary Adams. Zachary Adams has been an information security analyst at Frost Bank since October 2017. He assists in monitoring and securing Frost Bank's digital presence while working with multiple products at different layers of the security stack. He was born in San Antonio and graduated from Bernie High School in 2011. Later, he was accepted to Our Lady of the Lake University and graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in Computer Information System and Security in the spring of 2015. Since graduating, Mr. Adam has earned multiple information security certification, with the most recent being the CISSP certification in February 2020. He's always watching security intelligence feeds for the latest exploits or campaign relevant to the financial sector, seeks to improve his knowledge of information security and acquire new skills to enhance his application of this knowledge. So that is, we would like to welcome again our panelists, and we'd like to thank them for being here and helping us and do this presentation for our students. And Mr. Zachary, Mr. Adam was supposed to be here actually, and he'd like to do some presentation about current security threats with COVID-19, and he want to mention some statistics about the increased number of attacks that happen. And I'm sure that Mr. Clark will actually concentrate on these issues as well. Since he's not here, I would like to welcome you all. Thank you for attending this session. And please, for if you have a question, use the chat. Use chat for a question throughout this session, and I will keep track of folks' questions and ask them at the end of the session. All right, so let's get started. And my first question is going to be for the panelists. I will ask, since we have Mr. Clark alone now, the question is, what are the most significant security challenges that organizations are facing due to COVID-19 these days?
So I'm going to say that the number one issue that I have noticed is phishing. So phishing has always been an issue, but since COVID, I've seen an increase in the amount of phishing. It's a lot easier to isolate somebody and not have them able to ask anybody questions or anything like that. When they're at home, kind of secluded. Yes, we have chat systems we can call, but we can't turn to our neighbor and say, hey, is this email legitimate? Does it look legitimate? Things like that. The second issue that I've seen, and I've always seen this, but it's just more that more companies have moved remote is that getting new technology configured correctly. So, you're having companies that are just now implementing VPNs, work from home, VoIP systems, and they're having to learn on the fly, how to get them configured correctly, how to update them, and everything like that. And then another major issue is ensuring that your employees are not purposely or accidentally disclosing proprietary information, customer information, anything like that. You used to have everybody behind one specific network, everybody enclosed. Now you have people at home, and they can basically do what they want if you don't have some sort of data protection system in place. I see Zach has joined us now.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Zach, for joining. Thank you.
Yeah, terribly sorry I'm late.
Yeah, it's okay. We understand. You told us. Okay. So, Mr. Clark was talking about the most significant security challenges that organizations are facing today due to COVID-19, and he just mentioned some of these security challenges that you are talking about your company specifically, Michael, correct? This is mostly, I know some of them everyone is facing these days, especially phishing.
Yeah, so no, I'm
Yes.
talking about just in general. I mean, yeah, we
general.
have seen more implemented or more phishing attacks on our network, but we're also hearing it from a lot of our clients that they've seen a pretty big influx in phishing attacks.
Okay. Okay, the question is going to be like to you as well, Mr. Adam. What are the most significant security challenges organizations are facing due to COVID-19? I think you are muted. You need to unmute your
You're
microphone.
correct. Thank
Yeah.
you. Sorry about that.
That's fine.
Yeah, so at least at the beginning of COVID times, probably the disruption behind established security processes that usually require you to physically be there. Now that we couldn't, it messes with potentially delaying your response to whatever might happen. So when it gets delayed like that, sometimes you miss something, or it gets a little further than you would have hoped. And another thing that also got impacted by it was because there are more people now that are working from home, more of your digital surface area has been exposed to accommodate those people that are now working from home. So either now there's just more people on your VPN, more people using any sort of web interface that you might have, and that opens it up to you kind of DOSing yourself, as well as just you have more activity going on that could allow something to kind of slip by you.
Right. Okay, so related to this question specifically, we know that the motivation for attack is, they are different. Some motivation are for destruction, some motivation actually getting some financial, they have a financial gain actually. And I know that financial sector mostly could be under more attack than any other organization, or it is more into people, like through the phishing emails that is coming for as a personal level versus at a company level. I will give Mr. Clark, you to answer that question first, then go to you, Zach.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the last part of the question?
The question is that we know that hackers or attackers motivations are different. Some of them for destruction, some of them their motivation are financial gain. So especially during these days, people are more accessing the internet, or accessing their bank accounts, or they are doing their financial transaction online mostly, more than it used to be before COVID-19. So do you think that specifically comes to at an organizational level as well as the personal level, or for personal level more than organizational level?
I think that you're hearing a lot of these stories of just people, I'm going to call it having fun, just interrupting, we'll just say remote learning. So I feel like it's just giving more people opportunities just to go and show off, hey, look what I did, I can do
Okay.
this. I don't know. I mean, yeah, obviously some people are trying to get money out of it, but I feel like a lot of the stuff that has been going on has just been for
Okay.
bragging rights. I can shut down your school, I can shut down your class, I can disrupt your business, type of thing.
Okay. Mr. Adams.
Yeah, and because it's easy, or at least it was easy when it first started to do that, you had a lot of people doing it, which is why you heard it was just so widespread. Um, but when you're talking about other things like, for example, one thing that we're facing recently is just credential stuffing. That was a relatively recent development for us. Um, that is not so much motivated by mischief. That one is definitely more motivated by trying to log into people's accounts and steal their money.
Right. So our next question is how organizations performing tasks remotely. Go with you, Mr. Clark. How you can speak,
So,
of course. I'm sorry. You
no,
can
go for
speak
it.
about your organization as well as if you know other your clients, for example. How
Yeah.
do they do that? You can speak as well in
So,
general.
really, for a lot of these companies, they're just doing the exact same thing just from home. So they just log into the VPN. They're still performing work. They're still making phone calls. They're still doing all that. They're just doing it over the VPN, over VoIP phones. Obviously, more meetings and everything like that are virtual. So they're using things like Teams, WebEx, Zoom, all that sort of thing. But again, companies are still meeting, they're still performing the same work, they're just doing it from home over the VPN with their exact same laptop that they were doing it for my work. That's typically what I've seen. I've seen more messages. So people are messaging more. I mean, even at my job, we're messaging a lot more than we were when we were in the
Mm,
office because we can't just go, hey, did you see this or did you see that, type of thing.
yeah. Mr. Adams.
Yeah, it's very similar for us as well. We personally use Teams, um, but really the biggest difference between us being in the office and us working from home is sometimes when you're in the office, sometimes the best solution is to go to their desk and ask them that question if you want the most immediate answer. Now, sometimes you're kind of at the mercy of them being responsive if you want an immediate answer. Um,
Okay.
but these days, you're going to have to deal with that, unfortunately.
And it seems that's going to be for some times as well.
Yeah.
So, next question is what are some easy steps to help ensure you are more secure while while working remote? Mr. Clark.
Okay. So, some simple steps is make sure you have a strong Wi-Fi password. Make sure you're using encryption on your Wi-Fi. Let's start there. Making
Okay.
sure that it's not something easy. Make sure it's not a single word. Make sure it's not a single word with some letters. Making sure it's over 17 characters. Simple things like that can greatly enhance your security at home. Not only on the Wi-Fi, but on your personal level, your work level. Make sure you're using a strong password. I get that some companies make you change your password every 90 days, but you need to make sure that you're using strong passwords. Again, not single words with letters at the end, or numbers at the end, sorry. Making sure it's not the season and then the year. So your password policy mandates that you change it every 90 days. What's a great idea? I can change it to winter 2020 in the winter. I can change it to spring 2021 in the spring. I can change it to summer 2021. It's a great way to keep track of it. But every attacker in the world knows that that's a common thing. We see it all the time. We break into people's accounts all the time with a password of winter 2021, summer 2021. Some people even get crazy. They do summer 21, and then an exclamation mark. Again, these are pretty obvious things that pretty much any attacker knows. In order to keep track of these stronger passwords that you're using in your personal life, I suggest using a password manager. Some organizations have approved password managers, and you need to get a hold of your IT department and ask them if you guys have one. But in your personal life, I would definitely use one. So that way, for anything that you like, anything basically, you just randomly generate the maximum characters that will allow. So some of them let you do 20 characters, some of them let you do 60. You're never gonna have to type this thing in your password manager. You're gonna copy and paste it, or it's gonna automatically fill. So you just need to remember really one really strong password, which is your master account. And again, make sure that's a really strong one, 17 plus characters. No single words, no cars, no birthdays, all the stuff that you normally.
No dictionary words, you mean?
Yeah, if you
no
use
dictionary
words that are in the dictionary. So any word that's in the dictionary is going to be in someone's list. And there's more
Absolutely,
these days, so you can have whatever word in the dictionary, and then certain letters. You change like the A to an at, the L's to an exclamation mark, and stuff like that. And these crackers nowadays will do it automatically. You don't have to sit there and manually type them in. You just have summer, and it does summer 2021, summer 2020, summer 2021, bang. I mean, it does it all automatically. And it's pretty quick, typically. Another piece of advice for your work computer, or even your personal computer. I know it's a pain in the butt, and I don't always do it, but make sure you shut down your computer at the end of the day. So you have encryption. Your employer put encryption on your computer, but it doesn't really take effect until your computer's off. So if they take it when it's in hibernate, they crack your password, they get into it, it's done. They find some other way to get into your computer. If it has not been shut down, it's not actually encrypted, and there goes all your company's information. And I know that companies also tell you to not use your work computer for personal use. It is not, I mean, it might be to keep you from doing personal things on business time, but it's also because you're more likely to get some sort of malware, some information stolen, stuff like that by going to non-work related websites.
Okay. Mr. Adams, same question.
All right. So I did see that someone did suggest a password manager, which was LastPass. While Frost does not have approved password managers, and I believe you could probably ask for one. But I personally do use one while I'm at work. I am leery to use stuff like LastPass because those are not offline password managers. And I know for a fact when I use LastPass, every now and then I would get notifications from LastPass that their own systems were breached, and that makes me nervous when it comes to online password managers. The other thing also that I remember hearing from Michael was shutting down at the end of the day. I would make one slight adjustment. I would log off, depending on where you are. If you're at home, then shutting down is probably fine. But if you're in the office and you're still around in your Wi-Fi, it's beneficial because we've had this problem before where it takes a really long time for some workstations to get updates because machines are off during the update windows.
Okay.
But that's one thing. But some things that I would suggest is wherever you can implement it, multi-factor authentication is a big thing to do for any application that can support it. It helps support semi-weak passwords that are easier to remember, so that you don't run into the issue of people reusing very similar passwords, because there is another requirement in at least Windows where you can set it to where your new password isn't overly similar to your previous one.
Okay.
And using MFA, it helps to use more memorable passwords while still keeping secure, as well as multi-factor authentication helps prevent what I mentioned before with cred stuffing. They may have a good username and password pair, but if they need that second factor for authentication, well, then it doesn't work for them. Also, when you're working from home, you have to think about how your users are going to interface with your own network. And one common solution is the VPN, which basically just makes it act like your computer on your network in the office. We found that for some of our users, they don't need that much access, nor is it completely feasible for them. So another thing that we've also found is that using things like Citrix, which is virtual desktops that you can access over HTTPS, is sufficient for some of those purposes as well.
All right. So since we are talking about, password manager, I just have one more question. Michael mentioned that, and I know that some of these, password managers being compromised, some of them. And, I use it sometimes, but what I do is whenever it pose a password for me, I add my part of that, of my password to it one. I change it. I don't keep it as exactly as it is. Maybe I would add some part to it. Sometimes I change some. Do you think that will be effective in that regard? Especially, the number of attack is, tripled. I don't want to say actually maybe 100,000 more than it used to be than COVID, and specifically when we are working remotely now. Do you think that will be effective, Michael, as a pen tester expert?
So you mean add your own flavor to the randomly generated password,
Yes,
or add?
but I'm talking generally about, password manager. Are they effective as, they're supposed to be? Because we know that many of them being compromised.
Yeah, so I've heard of some being compromised and that they got the encrypted hashes off of their systems. If you're worried about that, you can use something local that encrypts it. So like KeePass, or there's several others that you just keep on your machine locally. But I mean, if you can memorize a 20 character randomly generated password, all the more power to you. I cannot, but sure, adding your own flavor to it. Yeah, I mean, it'll actually make it more secure, because technically, because it's not what it generated for you if you're worried about them getting some sort of access to that system.
Okay. What do you think, Mr. Adams?
Yeah, so
Do you recommend this? I'm sorry. Do you recommend that, Michael, as well as Zachary? Do you recommend that, for your clients, for the employees, for example, to do such things?
I can't say I've ever heard of other people requesting password managers for their machines, because that's not what my department does. But I know that everyone in my department does use a password manager. Although it varies. I use a different flavor of KeePass, and then everyone else uses KeePass or whatever they might want to use. But it also reminded me that at Frost, we do have some of our users having administrative powers. But we don't keep those administrative powers on their normal ID that they use to log in with every day. We have those separated out into their own administrative IDs. And those passwords are rotated daily through a system that we use. So every day it's a new password for that admin account.
Okay, I have a very related question here coming from, Dr. Clark. How do panelists feel about the cost-benefit relationship of creating many extremely long passwords without the use of a password manager? Again, how do you feel about the cost-benefit relationship of creating many extremely long passwords without the use of a password manager?
Well, if we're talking about people, they're going to write it down.
Yeah.
If
That's
it's
a
not using a
security.
password
That's a
manager,
security issue here once they write it down.
yeah.
Yeah.
So once they start writing it down, then it kind of loses its benefit of it being long and complex, because then it's not what you know anymore, it's what you have. And what you have can be easily stolen. And if it's not going to be in KeePass, it's going to be like in an Excel document. And I've seen that before.
Okay.
For some of my other employees at Frost.
Yeah, so I'll just build off what Zach said. I mean, we see it all the time. We see text files, Excel files, Word files, all sorts of things, and it's just bam, all the way down a username and passwords for this system, for that system, for that system. When we go on physical site reviews, there's bound to be we do searches of people's desks. I'm going to say 100% of the time we find at least one set of credentials. Typically, at each organization, you'll find a book, and it's just in a book of written down username, password. This is the website for their personal, for their work, everything. So yeah, I'll build up. If you make people have multiple passwords and you don't allow them to use a password manager, they're going to write it down. They're going to put it somewhere. They're not going to be able to remember it all.
Okay, so our last question here, and then we will take questions from the, from crowd. What new strategies and countermeasures do you think organization needs to implement in this situation in COVID, working remotely? I'm going to start with Mr. Clark.
Okay, so I have a couple of things written down here, but Zach had mentioned them earlier. Implement a VPN. If you have anybody doing any major work, they need to be on a VPN. He also did mention dual factor authentication. I 100% agree with that. Dual factor authentication on everything that it's feasible. Anything that can have it on there. It's not a bulletproof solution, so you need to take other steps, but that is a major one. Companies also need to implement more social engineering training. I get that it doesn't help in every situation, but at least you can say you told them. Sometimes they learn something that they don't already know. And the dual factor authentication will help with if someone gives away their password, because they would have to give away their password and their token. Back to the password issue. So, I mean, if you're the one making the decision, I would say make your users have a stronger password and not change it as often. Don't make them change it every 90 days, because they're just going to change the flavor of the password. So they're going to say blah, 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 one, blah, 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 two, or they're going to change it with the season, put the season in the year or something like that in it. Another major thing that companies can do is segregate the networks. So when you put them on a VPN, don't put them right into the internal network with access to everything. Segment them off a little bit. And a thing that every company should be doing, but we see that they do not, is patch management. So make sure you're updating everything. Obviously you test it, but if you're not updating this one application, that could be the weak link and let someone in.
Okay, good. Mr. Adams, you like to add something more of whatever you mentioned?
Yeah. One thing that I wrote down was we already had VPNs in use. It's just not everyone used it. But once everyone started to use it, it started to become overloaded, and they had to take some cost-cutting measures to kind of accommodate everyone for a while until they could increase the resources on the gateways. And that's one thing, is to make sure that your equipment can handle that increased load. And Michael mentioned phishing training. I feel Frost has a fairly strong phishing or user training for phishing, not only because we do have periodic phishing training for all of our users, we also do run phishing campaigns. So we have a guy who comes up with a phishing campaign on his own. And I remember the last one was fairly convincing. But then again, we're already aware of what exactly the email is, my department is. And if the user clicks on it, then not me or my department, but the phishing guy who made the campaign is made aware of who clicked on it, and they're slated for more training until they get that they can't trust every email that comes in. But on top of that, we also have tools that help detect phishing emails and get them away from users so that they don't click on them. But unfortunately, that's not the most effective solution, which is why it's also important to train your users so that you have more than one layer of that defense.
Okay, so in the same vein, actually, I want to ask a question is about what is the role of CETA programs, which is security, education, training, and awareness at this level? So is there any like, I want to say more tendency toward the training than before, or just, when I go into more technical uh, controls versus like what we call it training controls, or the other level, which is the policy controls that maybe organization try to use at these days, given the increased number of attack, the more people are working remotely, the what we call it, the traffic over the network, the organization network is, as you said, Zach, it's more actually worrying, especially with potential, I want to say, successful attack, given the fact that not everyone might have a VPN, because that could be something more costly for the organization. So I know that you are a pen tester, Michael, but do you like in your recommendation like concentrate on these CETA programs as well? Do the company do that?
So I would say, I know it's taught in classes as defense in depth. So
Yes.
you can implement all the controls in the world,
Yeah.
but that one email that makes it through the spam filter, user clicks on the link, bam, they got the malware.
It's done.
You can spend millions of dollars on the spam filter. I mean, something's going to make it through eventually.
Yes.
Someone's going to call them on the phone and ask them for the password. We make
Yes.
phone calls all the time, and I'm going to say 80% of the engagements, we at least get one set of credentials. So, and that's over the phone. That doesn't include the web ones. On the web ones, I'm going to say 95% of the time, we stand up a website, send you an email, your employees an email, someone's going to click. Someone's going to put the password on that website, and bam, that's the end of the day for the engagement. I would not spend all my time concentrated on one thing. It's got to be, again, a defense in depth. You got to implement everything, and you got to test it, make sure it works. One thing that Zach was talking about earlier was doing internal phishing. I found that if you make it more inconvenient for the person who clicks on the link, the more likely they are to think about it the next time. So Zach said that they force them to do training. I would also make them change their password. So now they have to change their password. Now they have to memorize that new password. And I don't know about you guys, but every time I have to change my password, I'm like, oh, come on. I don't want to change my password. I don't want to memorize this new one.
Yes.
So just make it a little more inconvenient for them, and they're more likely to follow the policies and pay a little more attention.
So, Mr. Adams, what's the company policy toward the CETA programs generally?
Yeah, so it's definitely important because your weakest link is people. So usually that's the first thing that attackers might try. And if you make that unfeasible for them, then they're going to try something more difficult, all the better for you. So for us, it's we do have a training program, and it's something that everyone's required to do. One way or another, it's enforced. So for training, it's mandatory as well as necessary.
Okay. So now I will move to I want to, before moving, to the questions from attendees. I want to tell you a story. It's something that a group of researchers had a study over, CETA programs, that they had a group of people, and they had a pre-test on them, and they sent them a phishing email. About 70% of people click the link because that message it's being fabricated to come from, for example, the CEO. So after they've been subjected to the training for this phishing email training, after, as Mr. Clark said, that it is like sometimes you do the training, but still you need just one person actually to click on the link, and that's it, we boom. So after, the problem is that these people immediately after the training, they were actually sent the same, a different email, okay, something like that. It was a phishing email, and 30% of these people actually click on that link. Still, the training is something that people as you were saying, that people, we need more awareness, security conscious from themselves more than just a training by itself. Yes. Okay, I have a question from, people actually from the crowd. She said the latest cyber attack on the United States, specifically solar winds, how much of an impact is that having on us? Like, how would we know if our system are impacted, or are victim of to this attack? You familiar with the attack on the solar winds?
Very much so.
Yeah. Okay. You want to start then, Zachary?
Yeah. So for SolarWinds, thankfully we were not impacted. But I can tell you about what we were doing to try to ensure that we weren't impacted, as well as just covering all of our bases. And so we were given a list of IOCs, and that list was ever expanding as the entire scope of the compromise was exposed. And those IOCs came in the form of file hashes, as well as compromised versions, domains that were being used by the malware. We searched for all of those, and for us, thankfully, we didn't find any evidence that any of our systems were compromised in that way. But on top of that, while we were doing that, just to be safe, we did completely shut down. Well, we didn't shut it down; it was still on, but we disabled the NICs of all of our SolarWinds servers, just to be sure, so we can investigate them separately, but also keeping them off the network so that they weren't, if they were compromised, they weren't doing anything further. But to find those IOCs, we used Splunk, and we also leveraged our vendors to look through our tools with them to see if they had any evidence of IOCs. And for us, thankfully, we found none. Because if we did, the only real way to make sure that you're not compromised is to completely destroy everything and rebuild, because that's the nature of that compromise, unfortunately.
Right. Mr. Clark, you would like to add anything?
No, I have nothing to add to that.
Okay. Our next question is from Jorge. What are your thoughts on using physical security tokens to aid in authentication, such as smart cards or SA secure ID tokens? Has COVID-19 increased, decreased, or had no effect on the use of physical security tokens? I'll start with you, Mr. Clark.
So I love the idea of physical security tokens.
Yeah.
It's something that you'd have to steal and then also know something they know. But again, I know they're not feasible for all organizations, because people are going to lose them. They have to train people, they have to buy them, implement the software to use them. But I'm a big fan of them.
Okay. What do you think, Mr. Adams?
Yeah. So physical security tokens are good for certain applications. For us, we use them for physical access. We didn't use them for digital remote access. That's what we used our MFA for. But regarding regarding implementing them, it depends on what you want to go with and how much you want to spend. The cheapest method is just an RFID card with your picture printed on it. And those are relatively cheap to replace if you lose them. And they do what you want them to do. But for something I see people mention a couple of times, YubiKeys, if I recall those, I think I've seen them before. But at least my management treated it more as a novelty rather than a necessity, because those things are expensive, as well as expensive to replace. So we had cheaper, more effective solutions, in their opinion, that we didn't need to spend money on YubiKeys.
Okay, another questions. Questions keep coming, and this way I will ask a question. I give you, I will not ask both of you the same question. Whoever answer that question will be enough. Then I will ask the second question as well. Beyond just moving online, how has COVID-19 encouraged hackers to exploit vulnerabilities within universities and enterprise settings? Uh, should I pick someone or want to go for that one? Okay, Mr. Clark. So how do you think that COVID-19 encouraged hackers to exploit vulnerabilities within universities and enterprise settings?
So how has it encouraged attackers?
Yeah.
I would say because there's more opportunities, there's more ways in, there's more people, there's more vectors for compromise, so therefore it makes it easier. There's more chances that they're going to get in. So they throw out more attacks, and the chances of them getting somebody to actually do whatever it is they want to do is more likely.
So the other question is why ransomware an attractive option for hackers, and what can we do as an end user to thwart cyber attack? Zach, you want to go with that?
Yeah. So ransomware is only really effective if you are caught unprepared.
Yes.
So ransomware is typically introduced through, usually through phishing, but and also if you're connected to the network, ransomware will spread using typically a exploit. So the two big things are making sure, of course, you have phishing training. I don't know if you can hear that. I'm near an airport or a military base.
That's fine.
Sorry. So yeah, making sure that your phishing training is effective to where people know how to recognize phishing emails, making sure that your systems are patched so that if you do get compromised through a phishing email, that the ransomware is not able to spread through whatever exploit it decides to use. But those two things failing, making sure that all of your important data is backed up as well as segregated from your network so that it would not be impacted by the ransomware. But I have also heard of smart ransomware that will lay dormant for a while so that it will find its way into your backups. And then after a while, then it will execute. And then after that point, worst case scenario, well, what are you going to do?
Wow.
We're always told don't pay them, but if it's something that you can't avoid, unfortunately, you might have to. And if you do, I've heard of situations where people are paying the ransom and then being targeted for future ransomware by even different actors because there is a precedent of you paying ransoms.
Right. The last part of the question, Kevin is actually, the panelists, they answered when we talk about the strategies and countermeasures that organization needs to implement. Okay, what other questions do we have? Okay, I have a question here. What changes do you foresee in the future, Mr. Clark?
So what changes am I going to see? I see in the future? I see people continuing to work remote. I see organizations having to spend more money fortifying their remote workers, giving them, as Zach was saying earlier, more bandwidth for these remote access tools, the VPNs and everything. I do see a lot of organizations keeping their workers at home, so they do need to invest more into securing their remote workers, training the remote workers, and giving them the hardware they need to ensure that whatever data is stored on the system is kept safe.
So more attack, that means more attacks, do you think?
Oh yeah, more attacks for sure. Yeah, the attackers are going to get smarter, the defenders are going to get smarter, it's just going to continue on.
Okay, I think this is, we have, maybe a room for one or two questions. I have a question. Have you seen a change in employee productivity? I want an answer from both of you, please, for this question, because, you are working for different type of organizations, different sectors. So maybe that, be a little bit different. So start with you, Zachary. Have you seen a change in employee productivity?
I have not personally. I know my management has talked about the future of work from home and how long it might last and what they have seen. And so far, doesn't really appear to have been impacted.
Nothing. What about you, Mr. Clark? Have you seen
Um,
anything?
I will say that Zach had mentioned earlier that you can't just turn to your neighbor and talk to them, and some of the responses are based off of how long they take to respond. And me at my organization, I have seen where you call somebody, email them, and chat them, and it takes significantly longer for them to respond than it would have if I had walked over there. So productivity, I don't know, but for sure, response times to inquiries, yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So I have another question. Zach mentioned being at the mercy of someone being responsive. Do you see delay in work being completed as a result of going remote? And I think, that's a good question. Do you see delay in work being completed as a result of being remote? I think you answered that question, correct?
There could be some.
Michael actually answered that. He said, he saw some delay. On your side, did you see any delay?
There can be if you don't manage it properly.
If you don't
So if
manage.
you're working on, say, like a project, or you're working back and forth on some other issue, if you have meetings set up periodically, which I know for a couple of my issues we do, just touch points to make sure that everyone has their chance to ask their questions and get answers. Um, but if it's something more ad hoc, like a security alert that you have to address and ask questions, like someone clicked on a phishing email, because we have one of those alerts. Um, One of the first things you have to do is contact the user. Well, maybe not the first thing, but you're going to have to eventually contact the user and ask them what they did with that email. Because oftentimes, when I come across the phishing email, it's just they're trying to steal passwords. So I have to go and eventually figure out, did they enter in anything? And if I can't get a hold of them by calling them, usually an email will be sent out. But I also might end up calling their manager, and saying, hey, I really need to talk to this person. Do you know where they are? So there's some avenues to getting a hold of somebody. And if you're able to get a hold of their manager, then their manager may be able to light a fire under them to get them to contact you as quickly as possible.
Okay. I think time is finished now. It's 3:20, and that's the end of our panelist. Like, just if I want to give you like last thing to say, like a recommendation either for organizations or for people. I want to say users or employees at a user level or an employee level. If you want to give them that type of recommendation, I want to start with you, Michael. So what type of recommendation that you give us, as users, as employees, and people working in IT or any other type of job?
I'll say my only advice is dual factor authentication on anything that can take it, and strong passwords.
Okay, good.
All right.
Mr. Adams?
Yeah. So one big thing that I was spoiled on, because I used to work for a managed security services provider in their SOC, where we had a lot of different customers from a lot of different sectors, but they all used our product. And the big thing for that product was we had to have visibility in everything that they wanted us to monitor. And that was a luxury, I find out, because visibility is very important so that you don't miss anything. So if, depending on your solution, if you use an MSSP or you have your own local Splunk implementation, you have to give them enough to where they can see bad stuff that can happen. And typically, the more logs that they have access to, the better. Unfortunately, that can become a bottleneck for some solutions like your local Splunk instance. I think they charge for storage. So if you feed it more, then you're paying more. But it's unfortunate because for example, you might find out something happened and you have to go gather those details, but you just don't have the logs. So you have to be creative with it, unfortunately, and sometimes it's just not doable.
Okay,
So,
thank you very much.
visibility.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I would like, on your behalf, all of us, thank, our panelists, Mr. Michael Clark and Zachary Adams, for dedicating their time and sharing their expertise actually in cybersecurity, and coming today for this very valuable actually information that I'm sure that all of us, will take, all of their recommendation. I would take all of their recommendation, from now on. And, thank you very much. And, that will, and, what we said, actually, that's the end of our session today. And all of us, stay safe from COVID, and stay safe from all types of attack. I myself, as I consider myself a security professional, every 2 weeks or 3 weeks I scan my computer, even though I have a good antivirus, but still I find many malicious things on my computer. So stay safe. Thank you very much, all. Thank you again, Mr. Clark and Mr. Adams. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
You too.
Thank you.